Good morning, delegations. Can you please take your seats? We'd like to get started in a minute or two. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to start our next plenary session. We welcome back to the third day of the open-ended working group. We've had some quite intensive discussions over the last few days. Even managed to do quite a lot of work yesterday, which was a surprise. So we're going to start with some feedback from our co-conveners on the contact groups that have been held so far. And I'd like to turn to the replenishment contact group to see what the progress is there. And I see that Ralph from the Netherlands has requested the floor. So Ralph, can I turn to you, please?
Good morning, everybody. I will report back from the contact group on replenishment also on behalf of Miruza from the Maldives. We had several sessions. The first two were directed to mostly questions and answers to the replenishment task force and also to the MLF secretariat. Clarifications were given, and today we started to collect the suggestions and ideas and possible scenarios for the supplementary report of the RTF. That was in a very good spirit, an open spirit, and a lot of ideas were floating in the room. They are all put in a document that's also available in the portal. We do need some more time, also because we have to talk about the ideas, because we are mostly collecting them, and I think it's good that we have more extensive discussions on the scenarios and the work that the RTF could do, because it's also important with the amount of ideas, otherwise they don't have any holidays or they have to work day and night for the next coming months. So that will be our task for the next days, to get to a clear ask to the RTF what to perform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ralph and Miruza, for your work. We know that you've had 3 meetings already and it's only Wednesday morning, so very much appreciate the hard work that you are taking and leading that group, and also to the group for their cooperative spirit is what I'm hearing. So very much appreciate that, and of course we will find some more time for your group to meet. We were going to be introducing CRP2 also this morning, but I understand that Cuba is actually going to be proposing a revision to CRP2. So once that revision, revised CRP is available, we will come back to that and have that CRP introduced. So it's on hold just for the moment until that revised CRP is processed. So hopefully we will come back to that this afternoon or at the latest tomorrow morning. So thank you for your understanding there. I now turn to my co-chair to get the next readout. Thank you, Igobi.
Thank you very much, Annie, and good morning, everyone. We now turn to the contact group on viability of the Montreal Protocol. Our co-chairs are Sergio and Alessandro. I now turn to Mexico to report back. Mexico, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. Yesterday, we had an initial meeting in the afternoon where the group was able to make progress with general comments on, for instance, the objectives for the work of the group over the course of this meeting. We also took the opportunity to ask a number of questions of the Ozone Secretariat. And very kindly, the Secretariat provided additional information about the broader process that is ongoing in the UN system, seeking to increase the efficiency of different multilateral environmental agreements. We made good progress. It was a good starting point. However, we are going to need more time to continue making progress in our work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sergio, and thanks to Alessandro as well for the facilitation. We will find some more time for the contact group to meet, and this will be announced. Thank you. Okay, so when we yesterday, we stopped at the Q&A session for the tip on agenda item 4, and we will be continuing from there. May I ask the tip to please come up for the continuation of the Q&A session? And as they make their way up, remember that yesterday we had 2 requests for the floor on the PFAS. So we are taking questions on the PFAS, and yesterday we had Norway and the European Union for the Q&A session. I'll just give a minute for the tip to come up and then we continue. Okay. So I'll give the floor now to Norway to ask that question. Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and good morning, colleagues. So we would like to thank the TIP and all its talks for this progress report and the key messages that they highlighted in their presentation. Regarding this issue, we have 2 questions. The first one, could you elaborate on the way the various regulatory developments regarding PFAS have contributed to a faster adoption of non-fluorocarbon alternatives in specific sectors? We heard mainly about potential drawbacks, and we think it could be informative to also hear about any positive impact on technology transition that contributes to the implementation of the Kigali Amendment. For the second question, so we are referring to your background slide in your presentation for the PFAS. There has been some new scientific development in Europe, and you are wondering if the panels will take consideration of this new information for the quadrennial assessments. It is a recommendation from the Risk Assessment Panel of the European Chemical Agency to classify TFA as reproductive toxic, very persistent, and very mobile. This scientific expert committee adopted their recommendation unanimously after evaluating scientific evidence that acknowledged the fact that TFA extensively migrates into drinking water resources and can cause prenatal development harm. I understand this matter perhaps would be better directed to the EAP, but considering the information in your presentation, so I send some space to ask this question as well. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Norway. I give the floor now to the European Union, and then we'll turn to the TIP to provide the answers. No, European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair, and good morning to everyone. First off, we wanted to say that we think the TIAP should be policy neutral and give us the science and technology. And it is quite clear, and that many other parties have mentioned that too, that parties have a right to their own policies, just as parties have their own ways of implementing Kigali. So the PFAS rules that are being looked at in the EU are based, as we said previously, on the precautionary principle and to provide clarity. So actually the first question we had was very similar to what Norway just mentioned, the classification and the evaluation by the chemical agency and the classification of TFA, if the TIAP is aware of this, because that is for us a very relevant point for parties, since many HFCs and HVOs break down into TFA, and this classification will result in immediate also labeling and sectoral restrictions for TFA. The process of setting PFAs is an ongoing structured scientific process, and we just had a large second consultation finished on the 25th of May. And after this has been concluded, the scientific process, it will be up to the Commission and the Member States to make the final rules. So it is at the moment, nothing is decided. It was a scientific...
I apologize, European
Yes,
Union. Please
I'm
get to
coming
your
to the second
question.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Yes. So, second question related to that is that why does the TIAP assume in their the report that there would be a delay in the transition? That's not the experience we have in the EU. We have seen that restrictions in the F-gas regulations, where we restrict the use of fluorinated gas in the sector, have led to the use of, for instance, propane in heat pumps. So it's quite the opposite that we've seen, that the manufacturers have responded and used non-PFAS. So we don't see that this is necessarily a delay in the transition. We would like the TIAP to comment on this. And question number 3 would be that clearly there's a lot more data becoming available on the PFAS issue, and we had Norway also referring to the fact in the process I just mentioned, the scientific process, a lot of new scientific publications were made, and we are happy to provide them to the TIAP. And we'd like to ask the TIAP if they could give us a bit of a snapshot what they will be providing us in the assessment report on this matter, and especially on as regards the recent scientific developments and how the coordination process in the TIAP is organized on that matter. Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, European Union. I turn to the TIP to provide answers to the questions from the European Union and Norway. TIP. Okay, I'll just give them a minute to organize and they'll provide the answers.
Thank you very much, Norway and the European Union. I'm steering carefully here, as you might imagine, to be policy neutral. TEEP is always policy neutral, although over the years, the last few progress reports, we have tried to say, to talk about the impact that policies might have and regulations might have on transition. We're not saying at this point in time that transition is delayed. It's certainly changing the range of options for industries in all the sectors. And, you know, there have been delays in decision making, I think, at this point in time. Of course, we would definitely not interfere with internal European Union processes. They're entirely right and proper. I would say that the TEEP is staying within its lane. We are what we are with a technical and economic assessment panel. The difficult issue, of course, is the TFA that comes from refrigerant gases and the way they're broken down in the atmosphere. And that's very definitely a complex issue for the SAP and the EEAP to opine on. We have stayed within our lane. We are coordinating with the EEAP and with the SAP in relation to our assessment reports so that we have the appropriate expertise giving opinions based on evidence. I know that the EEAP, they can, if EEAP chair's in the room, but I know they're doing an exhaustive review of all the evidence on TFA toxicity. About 100 papers, I think, and that will be within the EEAP assessment report. SAP and EEAP will be reporting on atmospheric fate of refrigerants, and we will continue to report in more detail, of course, on the impact, potential impacts in the different sectors if the range of chemicals changes that people can choose. I hope that satisfies you, and I'll just check with the TEEP to make sure I've covered that, please.
Thank you to Norway for the question about regulations. We are aware of two around the world, broad PFAS definitions, one in the state of Maine in 2040 and one in the state of in Minnesota in 2032 that would impact Montreal Protocol controlled substances and their replacements. I think that was your question, and then there's a lot of discussions around different policies that is continuing to create uncertainty for industry and their decision-making processes. Separately, on the TFA question, we are aware of the studies. I believe that EPA is likely aware of those studies as well, and I suspect they're working to incorporate that into their assessment report and can provide more information than we can around that. Is that?
Thank you for the questions from both Norway and the European Union. I don't know if I'm going to specifically answer the questions by listing them 1, 2, and 3, but I'll just share some of my views here, and they might answer the question. So when we looked at what the impact of the PFAS and TFA regulations could be on the RAC HP sector, we were looking at it not just from the European Union point of view. we were looking at it from a global point of view. And we were not just looking at what the impact on heat pumps would be. We were looking at it as impact on commercial refrigeration, industrial refrigeration, air conditioning, comfort cooling, and heating from a global point of view. And that is where our summary came from. And it's not just refrigerants. Refrigerants are one aspect of it, but the other aspect that we point out in our report is the fluoropolymers that get used in a lot of different components that go into the propane system, the CO2 system, the ammonia system. They all contain seals and gaskets and bearings in rotating parts that could all be impacted. It all depends on how the regulations turn out, and that is what we did. So when we provided our answers, we were looking at it very broadly from more than just the refrigerant point of view. I hope I have tried to help with that. If there's any more questions, happy to take them. Thank you.
Okay, responding to the question from the European Union about the delay, the possible delay in the transition away from, this isn't away from hydrofluorocarbons, it's actually away from Halon 1301 in aircraft cargo compartments. There is one, and at the moment only one, serious contender to replace Halon 1301 in this application, and this is the blend of 2-BTP and carbon dioxide, CO2. At the moment, there is no clear way forward with a derogation for this blend in this application because it's not an application yet. It's a system that's still in evaluation and development. And given that there is not a clear way forward and a possible derogation, the civil aviation is basically paused because there is not a clear way forward, and our understanding is that civil aviation is unwilling to commit the significant resources to finalize this system with no clear way forward that it could actually be used in practice. So that's one of the reasons that we think these potential PFAS regulations are causing a delay in transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Tip. I see no further request for the floor on this item. We now move on to question and answers on the next chapter, which is TIP organization. And I'm looking to the room to see if there are questions on this chapter. I see a couple of requests. I will give the floor first to the United States, followed by Iran. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair, and our thanks to the TEEP for their efforts in looking at this agenda item and in particular at the organization of the TEEP and its talks. We did have a few specific questions that we wanted to raise. First, are we correct in understanding that the TEEP asked each of the talks to reflect on their organization and structure, and that's what is provided in the report? Our recollection is that in the past, they have taken a different approach, and perhaps at the TEEP level or with some sort of cross-talk committee have looked at this. The reason why we're asking is we're wondering to what extent did the TEEP take into account any inherent biases that would be likely to occur when you're asking a group to assess if it's working or not? Not that we're questioning whether or not the talks are working. There's just an inherent bias that we're aware of, and we just want to understand, did they take that into account? And if so, if they could just point us to a little bit more information as to how they did that. We're also wondering about a few things that we didn't see covered in the report that we were expecting. For example, did the TEEP think about the organization of task forces or other temporary subsidiary bodies. We saw really a look at the talks, but not necessarily information on how TSBs are working, and is there anything the parties should be considering with regards to TSBs. We're also wondering, and we'll note our appreciation to the members of the TEEP and the talks, and we heard several times, as we all recognize, there is a lot of work that gets put before these people, and there's always a concern for making sure you have sufficient membership. So one question we had is, did you think about whether or not, for example, if you have a talk with not very much changes year in and year out, did you think about, could that work be handled by a senior expert as opposed to a full talk? Is there an option to look at the scheduling for meetings, reflecting that there may not be enough changes to justify perhaps every year putting the information in a progress report, where it's not changing very much? We recognize for some of the talks, there's much change happening year in and year out, but for some it seems like the reports consistently say very similar things. So we're wondering if the team gave some thought to other kinds of structures, and if they did, if they could share that with us. And lastly, and somewhat related to that, did they think about not just perhaps the actual structure of having 5 talks and how they look? Did you think at all about, what if meeting structures change or opportunities to collect information changes? For example, we know maybe not this past year, maybe it was the year before, you had several talks meet at the same time. Was that helpful? So any reflection you could give us, because as we look at this agenda item, we think that there's many different ways we could approach the questions, and we really would like to know more from the TEEP about your thinking, and were you broad in this or was it very narrow, just so that we have a better understanding as we come into this agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you very much, United States. I give the floor now to Iran.
Good morning to everybody. Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. First, I would like to really appreciate the intention and the commitment of the TEEP and for their high quality reports, as every time they are preparing and providing to the meetings. I have 2 questions. One is about as I know that almost there are maybe 150 volunteers of the TEEP members in the worldwide. So whether they are asking for the annual meeting, it is for everybody, all of the TEEP members, or it is the group wise, or for the chairpersons or co-chairs. And also I can see they have a problem with the geographically and also gender balance problem. Whether they are also considering the age balance in their team also. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Iran. I will turn to the TEEP to answer the questions from Iran and the United States.
Thank you. First, to refer to the questions from the USA. In first instance, the question was whether we instructed TOCs to consult with their membership, whether this issue of reorganizational options was analyzed by the different TOCs. The answer is yes. This topic was part of all meetings of the TOCs in the first part of the year. Members were able to comment on possible options, on difficulties they saw, and I feel that we really socialized this issue, if you like, and the recommendations we came up with are a reflection of that. About the subsidiary bodies, this year we basically have the RTF. The RTF is working well. There have been some comments on the RTF about its duration, etc., in our reports. I don't think we went very much further than that. But I just remembered another question was whether there was a group inside the TEEP handling this issue or working specifically on this issue of reorganization. Yes, a subgroup of the TEEP dedicated itself to this topic, but again, trying to reflect what the TOCs themselves and their members had to say. We have thought about changing meeting structure. There have been some suggestions of having all the TOCs meet in one same place at the same time. However, TOCs meet with different agendas. Some of the TOCs actually conduct field trips in the countries where they visit, be it to learn about what the industry is doing, what the government itself, what alternatives have been implemented, etc. So often it's very hard or impossible to find common ground in just one place. I think I will give this to my co-chairs. Bella, you had something else to add, I think.
Sure, thanks, Marta. I think we sort of missed a question from the US asking, was there an inherent bias in our collecting information, asking a group itself to see if they were open to change? And I think that is always sort of difficult, given the workload. The group is very focused on the task in hand. And so for the near term, I don't think it's a surprise that our current talks were really, their preference was to retain the structure as we are, the 5 talks, and to make maybe some of those changes from within in terms of its organization and managing of the topics that is currently on their workload. But we left it open in our progress report to revisit, which is, I think, helpful on a periodic basis, if the structure still works, or we should consider additional options going forward. We were asked, I think, just a further clarification looking at the organization of task forces and temporary subsidiary bodies. So we make those distinctions based on the task of whether we do a TEEP internal working group to best address the task, or if we go out and get external experts for our task force. And so I think in our original response to the decision in 2020, what was that, last year? 2025, and we discussed last year, we did. We proposed, for example, a standing task force on replenishment, because it's very difficult to reconvene a group with a very limited amount of time to do that work in sort of a 5-month period. And we're sort of looking at the idea of having sort of a continuous functioning of those experts for standing tasks like replenishment. So we have made those other considerations. And I think the only other thing we, to add to the question was on operational processes. Did TEEP consider those options? I think we discussed them a little bit in our original response to the decision that, talks are constantly conducting the work that they need to do within their committees online. The talks meet once a year because the face-to-face meeting is very important. I think this gets to Iran's question as well. It's only the TEEP membership of about 20 members, which includes our senior experts and the chairs of the talks that meet on an annual basis, and not the full 150 volunteers, which would be a very fun party, but no, we don't do that. And then continuing with yes, we have our challenges in turning, and we look to parties to help us with the balance in terms of geographical and gender balance. We appreciate that parties are hearing us and making nominations to the talks as well as to the TEEP to sort of get us the right experts that we need for our work. And we are, I think, just as challenged with parties on age balance. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, TEEP. We take another round of questions. I have on my list the United Kingdom, the European Union, Canada, and Australia. I give the floor now to the UK.
Thank you, Co-Chair, and thank you to the TEEP for their work on this important matter. We have 3 related questions to help us with the reorganization of MCTOC in particular. Can you elaborate on how MCTOC has been operating in practice in recent years? How frequently do the medical and aerosols work streams need to work together on cross-cutting matters? And to what extent do they already operate independently in practice? Thank you.
Thank you, UK, for the questions. I give the floor now to the European Union.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I actually have a question that is very similar to the UK, and it's indeed focused on the preferred option as identified by TEEP in relation to MCTOC. We note that the suggestion is to work with subcommittees, and I think we had in the past already a discussion on RTOC, for reasons why RTOC proposed to work in the context of 2 subcommittees. If MCTOC would work in such a setup, could you explain a bit what would be, let's say, the expertise of the 2 subcommittees and where do they come together? Where is the shared part of the expertise that makes that they continue to have to work together? And then where does it deviate when they work in their subcommittees? Also looking a bit at the progress report of this year itself, there is no indication on the size of the subcommittees, while I think there is some material there that lists all the potential issues that need to be tackled by the group, and they are quite extensive. So would this be 2 subcommittees of similar size, or would there actually be a differentiation between the 2 subcommittees in this case? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, European Union. I now give the floor to Canada.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and we should probably have consulted the UK and the EU before, because our questions are similar. We have a couple of others, but I'll just go through them, just four questions. One for the MCTOC and the RTOC. Our understanding from the report is that these technical options committees are already working under the format, the structure of 2 subcommittees, and now the TEEP would like to formalize that somehow. Is that what's being proposed now, or are you proposing to some kind of change to the way that you're operating? Second was also a question on what is the size of each of the subcommittees, both for the MCTOC and the RTOC. Third, and that applies more to the RTOC, so there's proposed to be one subcommittee that's called cold chain and other applications, and the other one comfort cooling and heating. What is meant by other applications? Do you have some ideas of what are these other applications? Are there, or would there be many? Are they mainly refrigeration applications? And where would air conditioning for data rooms fit? Like, it doesn't seem to be part of the cold chain, and we don't think it's comfort cooling. So we'll be interested to know which subcommittee handles air conditioning in data rooms. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Canada. Before we turn to the TEEP to respond, can I just take a question or questions from Barbados? Barbados, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Good morning, everyone. I would like to speak on the topic of this, resolving the travel support deficit that seems to be reoccurring. This is maybe my third meeting where it's been mentioned by the committee. I'm just wondering whether there have been estimates as to the number of non-A5 experts that would require financial assistance and what that cost would look like. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbados. I turn now to the TIP to provide some answers. Okay.
So I'll take the questions regarding MC-TOC first. I think there were some questions about how frequently there are cross-cutting issues that and how we operate separately or together, and how frequently we kind of operate separately or together. And there was also questions about about size. Okay, so in terms of the way we operate, we already operate in subgroups. And we come together at critical times, like at our face-to-face meeting. We come together at the start of the year to talk about our work program and kind of deal with any cross-cutting issues at the start of the year. And then we come together at kind of regular points throughout the year, whether that's face-to-face or online, if we're trying to reach consensus on our reports, because we're a whole committee, and as a whole committee, we have to reach consensus on our reports according to our terms of reference. And that's quite useful at the moment, particularly, and that's where we kind of indicate in our report that, you know, we can always revisit this issue in future. But at the moment, there are lots of critical issues of importance to the Montreal Protocol around the availability and supply of pharmaceutical grade propellant. And we have a group of members in the chemicals group who have a lot of expertise there. If we were to separate those committees, that expertise would not be there. And we need to be able to provide balance in the advice that we provide to parties. We have one member, or actually two at the moment, who are from the same company, but one of them's transitioning to retirement. So we have one propellant company on the medical kind of subgroup. And if the two groups were to split, obviously we would have a concern then about the balance of information that we would be presenting to parties, because it would be one commercial position, effectively. In terms of then size, those two subgroups are about 50-50 of our membership, slightly smaller chemicals, slightly larger medical. Also then in terms of if we kind of look to the model of RTOC, where they've in recent years moved to 4 co-chairs, it would be incredibly helpful for the workload of the co-chairs of the medical and chemicals TOC if parties might consider that model for the MC-TOC as well. And that's why we proposed 4 co-chairs, to help us with all of those things that come with the role of co-chair when you're managing a group of 40 people. And I think that's all from me. I think I've answered everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. So I think most of the RTOC questions were specifically from Canada, so I'm going to try and address them as best as I can. The current RTOC structure is 2 subcommittees with 20 members each, and the 4 co-chairs share responsibilities across both subcommittees. And the bulk of the work, if you will, is in the cross-cutting. I think there was a question from EU about cross-cutting. And so I can address how it is working within RTOC. The overlap between the 2 subcommittees of 20 members provides almost 30 experts, 15 from one side, 15 from the other. Think of it as a Venn diagram with 2 circles intersecting. And this group of 30 people that is inside of the total 40 members end up addressing most, if not all, of the cross-cutting topics. And those are significant number of cross-cutting topics, LRM being one, energy efficiency being another, and so on and so forth. Again, LRM and energy efficiency are applicable to both cold chain as well as comfort cooling. Which leads me to the next question, which is, again from Canada, about cold chain and other. What is in the other? In the other, you'll find non-in-kind technology, data centers, things that did not necessarily fit inside of comfort cooling and heating. We brought them into this other category. And yes, data centers are covered under the other section. Yeah, and just one last comment. With the permission of the parties, we were able to sort of experiment how this new format would work. And I can tell you, as someone that has experience in many different committees, in many different organizations, these 2 subcommittees and overall RTOC is working extremely well. It is not without little blips here and there, but those blips are handled very professionally, and any disagreements are dealt with in a very equitable and professional manner. And at the end of the day, I think the final product, which is the assessment report that you'll see then, in December or January, I think that will show you the quality of the work that the 40 members have been able to produce. Thank you, and thank you for your support on that as well. Appreciate it.
I think that we didn't answer one specific question from the United States, which was whether in TOCs with little change, there could be some evolution to less frequent meetings maybe, or be managed by a senior expert. And I think that we will obviously, change management is hard to do bottom up, as you so rightly said, but we're very enthusiastic as a group to make sure that we're fit for purpose for the parties, and that we, of course, want to evolve the TEEP as topics become more important and less important, so that we serve the parties with the right information they need.
Thank you very much, TEEP. Okay. Thank you so much. I don't see any further request for the floor. Barbados, you have the floor.
Okay. Tip,
Sorry, Barbados, that was an omission. We are handling the non-A5 expert travel on a case-to-case basis. Our members do their best to get funding from, you know, some sources they have, the government or whatever, the companies sometimes. The Ozone Secretariat has supported us with travel for some non-A5 experts, but no, we have not done a specific estimate of what the cost would be to move or for travel of all non-A5 experts at the time.
Thank you very much, Tip. I see no further request for the floor on this chapter. As we had previously indicated, before we close the Q&A session, we'll provide an opportunity for parties to ask general questions that they did not manage to ask under any of the chapters. Are there any requests for the floor with questions, general questions? I see no request for the floor. I would therefore like to close the Q&A session and thank the TIP and its talks once again for their outstanding work. They may go back to their seats. Thank you very much. I now hand over to my co-chair to deal with the next item. Annie.
Thank you very much, Igobi, and also my thanks to the TEEP for their hard work and patience in answering the many questions that have come forward from parties. We now turn to the consideration of the sub-items under Agenda Item 4, and we start with 4A on HALON 1301 and its continuing use in the aviation industry, management of other controlled substances used for fire suppression. On Monday, we heard the presentation from the TEEP on this issue, and there was also the Q&A session on this issue yesterday. Parties will recall that in addition to requesting the TEEP to submit a report on HALON availability and the global distribution of HALON banks through a decision 37.4, the decision also requested parties to submit to the Ozone Secretariat on a voluntary basis available information regarding the development of suitable alternatives for fire suppression. Those submissions were due on the 31st of March 2026, and the Secretariat was requested to forward such submissions to the TEEP for its consideration and inclusion at the latest in its 2027 progress report. The Secretariat has received 35 submissions, actually, and we thank the parties for these contributions. TEEP will consider this information and any other further submissions from parties in its 2027 progress report. We would also like to note that the Ozone Secretariat, in collaboration with the Secretariat of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions, and the Multilateral Fund Secretariat, has prepared a draft guide on the transboundary movement of controlled substances and equipment contained in them. The draft guide has been posted on the meeting portal as a background document for review by the parties, and comments are sought, but it is not for discussion at this meeting. The Secretariat has indicated it will communicate with parties on this specific issue in the coming weeks, and provide a little bit more information on the process for commenting on that draft guide. So thank you for that information. Right, the floor is now open for a discussion on, in relation to Agenda Item 4A on HALON 1301 and its continuing use in the aviation industry, as well as on management of other controlled substances used for fire suppression. The floor is open. Thank you. I have a couple of parties wishing to take the floor. So on my list so far, I have India, the European Union, Australia, Kenya. We'll leave it there. I turn to India. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We thank the Ozone Secretariat, the ICAO Secretariat, and the Technology and Economic Assessment Panel's Fire Suppression Technical Options Committee for their comprehensive updates and ongoing collaborative efforts. Madam Co-Chair, civil aviation safety remains paramount. While we note the FS talks concerning runout estimates for Halon 1301 banks, the management of existing banks must not compromise the fire suppression capabilities of current operational fleets. Furthermore, the burden of expediting the development, certification, and deployment of alternatives, as well as determining revised cutoff dates for new aircraft type certificates, must lie primarily with the original equipment manufacturers and the global aerospace industry. Secondly, projecting long-term Halon 1301 needs is highly dependent on airline procurement plans and OEM production timelines. While there is a need to promote coordination between the national ozone units and civil aviation authorities, global consolidated data from aviation industry bodies will yield far more accurate macro-level projections than simply summing up individual reports from national ozone units. Thirdly, regarding the FS Talks suggestion to review the essential use nomination evaluation process, it is important that any revised EUN framework must be simplified and transparent. It must accommodate the realities of Article 5 countries, whose national carriers rely heavily on imported aircraft fleets. Any process should not result in an undue administrative burden on Article 5 countries to accurately forecast complex global supply chain constraints. While we understand the necessity of facilitating the import and export of recovered and reclaimed halons to sustain civil aviation needs, this must strictly align with national hazardous waste management regulations. It would be useful to have globally recognized guidelines that explicitly distinguish between waste or contaminated halon and usable reclaimed halon. This distinction is critical to ensure that airlines can access necessary safety stocks without turning Article 5 countries into dumping grounds. Finally, any transition away from Halon 1301 hinges on the availability of alternatives, which must not only be technically viable, but also commercially available and economically affordable for airlines in developing countries. This transition must be accompanied by robust capacity building and targeted support for the servicing sector in Article 5 parties. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, India, for those observations. I turn now to the European Union.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We also like to thank the FSTOC members for their work on this very important matter, as well as for giving replies to our questions yesterday, and also to extend our thanks to the Secretariat for collecting party submissions. Clearly, we would need some further detailed exchanges with TIEP members to better understand the report. Still, for today, we would like to point out some preliminary comments on this topic. Firstly, we would like to highlight that there are alternatives available for several critical applications, not only for handheld extinguishers, but also for engine nacelles, as well as for cargo compartments through the 50-50% CO2 2-BTP blend. This information has also been submitted by the EU as the response to the last year's Halon's decision. We welcome very positive developments in the United States concerning the proposed 2-BTP CO2 blend as a potential alternative. In the EU, the blend is approved. Our aviation agency, EASA, has completed the technical assessment and is ready to certify any aircraft application if industry submits one. These developments clearly demonstrate that technically feasible alternatives are available, so the focus should now be on moving further with certification and deployment, while at the same time ensuring the sustainable management of existing halon banks. In the EU, we already prohibited the installation of new halon systems in aircraft cargo compartments
from the end of 2024, while also requiring the retrofit of all existing systems by end of 2040. We heard the FS talk yesterday mentioning that they were not aware of other retrofit dates. So today we would like to underline that under EU law, retrofit is also required in aircraft for engine nacelles, protection of dry base, and the inerting of fuel tanks, also by end of 2040, as well as for many military applications used in ground vehicles, submarines, surface ships. These dates not only provide regulatory certainty, but they also encourage transition to alternatives and ensure freeing up halons for other uses. The EU ODS regulation, as also mentioned before, prohibits the destruction of halons, thereby requiring reclamation where possible and preserving existing stocks for remaining essential uses. Secondly, on PFAS, we underline that at present, there are no restrictions for aviation. We want to clarify that the opinion of our chemical agency is expected to be finalized later this year. The process is very inclusive, and the recent consultation that ended in May has resulted in approximately 2,500 stakeholder comments. So this remains a scientific assessment that has not yet entered the decision-making legal process. It is for the European Commission to make a proposal on specific PFAS restrictions. This includes the possibility to allow for adequate, even unlimited exemptions for critical sectors where no suitable non-PFAS alternatives are available. The European Commission has already committed to including such exemptions for strategic sectors. The aviation sector will therefore need to be addressed in that framework. We'd thus like to note that we have alternatives in some of the most difficult applications. Handheld cargo-based engine nacelles. These could be used by industry. And this scenario saves up halon use in new planes, as well as for use in maintenance, and also frees up halon recovered for older planes. It would also be important to measure the effect that taking up these alternatives at global level will have on the end dates discussed yesterday at the FS Talk report, as well as increased efforts to avoid destruction of halons. How would that impact the end dates we discussed yesterday? We consider that such measures would delay those dates substantially. So we welcome TIEP meeting yesterday to taking a look at these scenarios. We also welcome the newly reinforced cooperation between the Ozone Secretariat and the ICAO Secretariat to assess global halon availability, and we look forward to having more updates in the future. This should provide a clearer picture of halon availability and demand. At the same time, as we mentioned at the beginning, there are still significant uncertainties in the current assessment, including a decade of difference between closest and farthest dates where stocks could run out. So to better understand the current analysis, we would need further clarifications by the TIEP on the scenarios, assumptions, and figures presented in their report. We would therefore appreciate to have some dedicated technical discussions with TIEP to better understand these issues, and to discuss also how we as parties can better support their assessment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, EU, for those comments and that information provided. I now turn to Australia.
Thank you, Co-Chair. We would also like to thank the TEEP for the report, and we would also like to thank all the parties who submitted information on the development of alternatives. We support the FS Talk to continue monitoring the availability of halons and other major fire suppressants and the development of alternatives. And we encourage the Secretariat to continue the strengthened liaison with the ICAO. And we certainly appreciate the attendance of ICAO representatives and aviation experts at this meeting as a demonstration of the increased and improved cooperation between those bodies. We do note with concern the updated estimated run-out dates for Halon 1301 and the risks that that poses to the phase-out of ODS and the phase down of HFCs if no alternatives can be determined to be suitable in the short to medium term. We do appreciate the recent findings in the US and the EU and the approval processes in relation to 2 BTP CO2, and we hope that work continues in this direction so that stocks of halon, existing halon, can be preserved for those uses for which there are currently no alternatives. We note the discussion around essential use processes for halons. It's our view, based on the uncertainties in the run-out dates at this time, and that we are not aware of any looming shortages, that we don't consider that it's a priority to commence work on revision to EUE processes at this time. We'd also like to make the comment that in order to preserve the existing banks of halon and other fire suppressants that are controlled, that destruction of these fire suppressants should be avoided unless the fire suppressant in question is no longer viable and cannot be reclaimed to an acceptable specification. I would also like to indicate that in the domestic setting, Australia has just commenced a project to assess our future needs for halons and fire suppressants and HFC fire suppressants. We hope to have that work finalised in early 2027, and we'll be very happy to make that available to assist in any assessment of global stocks and to assist in updating estimates of run-out dates. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Australia. On my list now, I have Kenya, United States, and Saudi Arabia. If any other party wishes to take the floor on this issue, please make your intentions known now so we can close the list. Kenya, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We thank the TIP for its informative presentation, and we also take note of the progress made in implementing Decision 37/4. Kenya has made significant progress in phasing out the use of halon 1301 under the implementation of the Montreal Protocol. While the use of halons has largely been addressed nationally, we recognize that essential uses may remain in specialized sectors, particularly civil aviation. In this regard, Kenya is engaging the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority and other relevant aviation stakeholders to assess any remaining use of halons, the availability of suitable alternatives, and future supply arrangements consistent with the objectives of the decision. Kenya is therefore one of the countries implementing a JEF-supported UNEP-ICAO project called Fortifying Infrastructure for Responsible Extinguishment. In short, it's called FIRE, that aims to dispose of the stockpiles of fluorinated firefighting foams that have been phased out at the civil airports since the foams contain PFAS. Taking into consideration this project, halon 1301 is part of accounting under the project, and we expect that the stockpile of halon 1301 would be dealt with accordingly in the aviation sector. We therefore recognize that Decision 37/4 seeks to ensure that the remaining essential uses of halon 1301, particularly in the aviation sector, are managed safely and sustainably while supporting the transition to technically feasible and environmentally sound alternatives consistent with the objectives of the Montreal Protocol. Lastly, we welcome the ongoing collaboration between the Ozone Secretariat, ICAO, and TIP, and we also look forward to reviewing the practical guidance on the transboundary movement of controlled substances, which will assist parties in implementing the decision effectively. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Kenya. I turn the floor to the United States.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair, and we'll try and be brief. We agree with many of the things we heard from our colleagues from Australia, and in particular, we want to highlight a couple of things. First, we heard just now that there are no restrictions on 2BTP in certain jurisdictions. We would like to make sure that information is being clearly communicated, because our understanding based on ICAO's resolution last year and the industry's, the aviation industry's responses was there was some perhaps not clear information regarding the process of derogations and how long those last and whether or not that's a process that would have to be revisited. If it's, if I had understood correctly that you said there are no restrictions, we do hope that they are communicating that clearly so that folks can plan for the use of 2BTP or 2BTP with CO2 in combination. The United States previously has approved 2BTP. The approval that is pending is for 2BTP in combination with CO2. We also understand and have been working with the approval processes, ensuring that there are suitable alternatives for other uses of halon, both on aircraft as well as in other enduring applications. We also want to just note that we too are concerned with the destruction of halon, particularly when it's being destroyed for certain markets, and we are concerned about the process in which there may be short-term financial gain at the risk of longer-term problems and shortages. So we do ask that we would encourage parties to be cautious and thoughtful, particularly if that halon can be reprocessed back up to specifications that are appropriate for aircraft. And we would agree with some points we heard very early on in this discussion that, you know, we don't want to see halon that is not at suitable reprocessed levels. That would put risk for aircraft and for personnel. However, our understanding is that most halon at this point is often all being reprocessed to the same types of standards. So we do want to ensure there's a good supply available for these enduring uses. And we will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, United States. I turn now to Saudi Arabia.
شكرا سعادة.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia would like to wholeheartedly thank the talks on fire extinguishing and TEEP for all the efforts under Decision 37.4. We thank the Ozone Secretariat for its coordination with ICAO. The Kingdom reaffirms that fire distinguishing and civil aviation is directly related to safety. Any deviation from halon 1301 should be based on practical alternatives. The report highlights the progress achieved, and we know that there's no information on any fire distinguishing agents on the short term, despite the 30 years of research and development. This is extremely important because ICAO, in accordance with Decision A4111, has cancelled this council in new aircraft designs. It is important to reuse the recycled halon so that we can live up to the growing needs. It is important to continue cooperation with ICAO and to continue the technical evaluation, particularly for the benefit of Article 5 states before any reassessment of these needs and these uses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saudi Arabia, for those observations. Last on my list is Canada. After that, I will propose a way forward. Thank you, Canada.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I think you meant to say last but not least. Maybe. Well, we thank the TEEP and the FS TAC for the updated information they presented in their progress report and actions that have been undertaken in response to Decision 37/4 and ICAO Resolution OEWG48 we are concerned that the FS stock, according to the FS stock, the refined run-out date for Halon 1301 is now estimated to be in 2035, plus or minus 4 years, based on latest available data from civil aviation, oil and gas, nuclear power plants, together with the amounts being recovered from shipbreaking activities. We do understand that there is still, some significant level of uncertainty with respect to these estimates, and we're also interested to discuss with the FS stock and other parties how we could refine, the information that we have on banks and emission rates and future availability of Halon 1301. But still, the range of run-out days that we have before us is significantly smaller than we had under the 2022 FS stock assessment report. We also wanted to note that the ICAO Resolution 4211 directs the Council to develop a proposal for a revised sustainable cutoff date for the use of halon in cargo compartments and fire suppression systems in new aircraft designs. And as the FS stock has mentioned, in practice, this could mean that the global civil aviation industry is committing to require Halon 1301 for at least an additional 50 years, and perhaps longer into the future. The ICAO resolution also encourages states to support an essential use nominations to maintain aviation safety. We agree with Australia that it is not urgent for this body to start considering an essential use nomination, and that we should focus on better understanding halon availability and continue to encourage the sustainable use of existing halon stock. That said, as indicated by the FS stock, the current EUN process would probably not be adequate to address the needs of Halon 1301, as individual parties would not know in advance the quantities of substance that they would require to be produced and consumed on an annual basis to meet servicing needs of civil aviation aircrafts within their jurisdiction. This means that if there was a need for essential use of Halon 1301 in the future, the process could be quite complex. So we do think it's worth to at least start thinking about this issue so that we are prepared in the unfortunate event that an essential use nomination does become necessary in the future. And that is another issue that we would be interested in discussing with other parties and the FS stock. Thank you.
Thank you very much, delegations. I think that's been a useful exchange, many important observations made and information exchanged. So I think that was very helpful. At this time, I don't see a need for a contact group or an informal group. I would propose that, I think it was particularly the EU and Canada who were interested in a little bit more information, that they make time in the margins of the meeting to talk to the FS talk more about their concerns or to pose further questions to the FS talk. And I therefore propose to close this agenda item for this meeting and that it not be taken up at the MOP, but that I guess it could easily be taken up next year in light of the assessment report that will be coming out and the 2027 progress report. Is that proposed way forward acceptable to parties? I don't see any parties wishing to take the floor, so thank you very much. This agenda item is closed. I now turn to my colleague, Igobi, for the next agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. We will now consider agenda item 4B on metered dose inhalers with low global warming potential propellants. In decision 36.6, MOB 36 requested the TIP to continue to provide updated information on law GWP MDIs in its annual progress report. We've heard the TIP's updates on this issue during their presentation, and all references for this agenda item are listed on the slide that is currently being projected. The floor is now open for a discussion on this sub-item. I see on my list, European Union, EU, you have the floor.
Yes, trying to help you out there, Madam Co-Chair. So we thank the TIA very much for the feedback provided. And compared to previous reports, we see a number of positive developments in this field. We read in the report that approval has been achieved in the UK and the EU, and I think we saw yesterday also in the slides that even Australia and New Zealand for one product, and a number of other approval processes underway, including in the EU, but apparently also in China and the US, Japan and UK. And that also includes very relevant medicines such as salbutamol, which is the large part of the MDI market. We also see that the use of dry powder inhalers is common in many countries, and in most patients can replace MDI applications, as we also heard yesterday from the TIAP. Apparently, according to the report, at least 10 companies develop new generation MDIs with lower GWP propellants. And it's also very noteworthy that we see in Article 5 countries, apparently 3 in India and Bangladesh, according to India, and generic manufacturers in Latin America that are moving in this direction. When we look at the production of the gases used for the new generation MDIs, apparently there's also 2 companies in China now making 1234ZE. And finally, maybe on this long list, we see that suppliers in producing countries, China and India, have indicated that they will ensure security of supply while we still need the currently technologies based on R134A. So there's a number of new developments that we didn't have last year, so that's for us a very positive note and addresses some of the concerns that have been expressed in the past. We have made a submission following the call in the decision, last year's decision, and we hear that there's another one from the US. But as I mentioned in the list, there's a number of countries where we have developments, so we would encourage other countries to also submit information. It's a standing call for information in the decision, so this would help TEEP to keep informing us on this issue. Just to recall that on the policy side in the EU, we have a need for quota in the HFC quota system since 2025. So we have a policy driver in place domestically. It ensures a smooth phase-in of the new technologies, and but until 2030, the quotas will reduce overall, but including for this sector. On the decision here, we have a decision in place that allows us to be informed as parties on the new issues and include the information in the annual progress report as we've seen this year, and we are very happy with the information we received, and we trust the TIAP to keep us informed as we go further. Also, the decision includes a revisitation of the issue once we have the quadrennial report available, which will be very soon. So that is also very good, and given that we have all these things in place, we would be happy to discuss further at this meeting if others see the need, but otherwise we are quite satisfied with what is on the table, and we would then look forward to the next update in the quadrennial report from the TIAB next year. Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, EU, and thank you for the observations that you've just made on the developments. I have on my list India, Canada, and Morocco, and I'll give the floor to India.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We thank the Medical and Chemicals Technical Option Committee for its comprehensive 2026 progress report. Meter dose inhaler sector is highly important within the broader context of the HFC phase down. As a country with a robust MDI manufacturing sector that serves both large domestic healthcare needs and vulnerable populations in other developing nations, we wish to emphasize the following key principles as we deliberate on this issue. Firstly, prioritizing public health and affordability. The transition to lower global warming potential propellants in MDIs is fundamentally a public health imperative, not solely an environmental one. Given that MDIs account for approximately 70% of global inhaler doses, this transition must not disrupt access to life-saving medications or disproportionately burden patients in low and middle-income countries with increased costs. Secondly, parties must retain the sovereign right to determine their own transition pathways and timelines based on their domestic healthcare frameworks, the maturity of alternatives, and the time required for rigorous national clinical trials and approval processes. Thirdly, intellectual property and technology transfer constraints currently act as significant barriers to the timely and cost-effective availability of alternative propellants such as HFC 152A and HFO 1234Z, as well as related device technologies. Proactive measures are essential to ensure that patents do not restrict generic manufacturers in Article 5 countries from producing affordable, lower global warming potential MDIs. Fourthly, any domestic HFC phase-down regulations and export controls should not inadvertently trigger supply shortages or price spikes for the pharmaceutical-grade HFCs that Article 5 countries continue to rely on for essential medical purposes. Finally, until lower global warming potential alternatives are economically viable, technically proven at scale, and culturally acceptable by patients in developing nations, current MDI technologies must be safeguarded. Any transition in this vital sector must be matched with equal commitments to technical and financial support for Article 5 parties. We look forward to engaging constructively with all parties on this critical issue to ensure a smooth, equitable, and health-focused transition. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, India. I give the floor now to Canada.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Canada also welcomes the additional information provided by the TIP on the development of low GWP PMDIs. This continues to improve our understanding of the complexities associated with transitions in this sector. We noted that there is at least one HFO-based MDI manufacturer that has now received regulatory approval in Europe and the United Kingdom, and that several manufacturers continue to pursue low GWP alternatives. At the same time, we're mindful that commercially available low GWP alternatives remain at an early stage of development, and that low GWP solutions are not yet readily available for many parties. We want to note our strong appreciation to the submissions made by the European Union and the United States pursuant to Decision 36/6 regarding developments in their countries. We believe that continued information sharing of this nature can help inform future TIP discussions on this issue. And we also think that information from producing countries is useful to have also for importing countries, so that importing countries have an idea of potentially, the timing of the availability of low GWP alternatives based on the transitions happening in regulatory approvals taking place in producing countries. So in that respect, we were wondering whether there would be any objections from the EU or the US to have the submissions that they provided to the Ozone Secretariat posted somewhere on the Secretariat's website. And maybe it's also a question to the Ozone Secretariat whether it's something that could be done at some stage. And as well, like the European Union, we would encourage other parties producing MDIs to share relevant information pursuant to Decision 36/6 on technological development, regulatory approvals, and manufacturing considerations and transition planning, both to support the TEEP reporting on this issue and also to assist, as I mentioned, importing parties with respect to their potential transitions. So again, we thank the TEEP for its report, and we look forward to continuing discussion on this issue next year in the context of the 2026 quadrennial assessment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Canada. I also note the question that was posed for the Secretariat. We will get the Secretariat after the interventions from Morocco and Kenya to give a response. I now give the floor to Morocco.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Co-Chair. As this is the first time that Morocco takes the floor, I would like to, in turn, convey my gratitude to the government of China for the warm welcome they have extended to us for this meeting here in Bangkok. I'd also like to thank the Ozone Secretariat for the outstanding preparation organization of this meeting. My question is about the propellants of inhalers related to Decision 36/6. I would like to inform you that Morocco, there is a company that manufactures these inhalators with 134A. Now, the investigations we carried out were to determine whether there were alternatives, because we use 34A and we wanted to find alternatives to it. But all the questions that I sent to them, the response was always the same. There are no alternatives. So what we've heard here today is very good. It's good news. So I'd like to thank the TEEP. I've just learned that there are alternatives. And there are countries that are currently looking into other alternatives and manufacturing these alternatives. If I understood correctly yesterday, the R125 and the 1234ZE. My question is, these substances, are they commercially available? And the degree of commercial availability, and to help enterprises to transition to these low GWP substances, how accessible are they? And the technology which accompanies this substitution is of interest to us. And these are all questions which I hope would prompt the companies that manufacture these alternatives to 134A.
Thank you very much, Morocco, and for the probe questions as well. I give the floor now to Kenya.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Kenya takes note of the submission by the TIP and MC Talk and welcomes the progress made in the development of metered dose inhalers, MDIs, utilizing low GWP propellants. We further note that the pharmaceutical industry is introducing new low GWP MDI propellants with the objective of transitioning all MDIs to these alternatives by 2030. While this transition may contribute to the implementation of the Kigali Amendment while safeguarding public health, My delegation emphasizes that the successful uptake of these alternatives in developing countries will depend on their accessibility, affordability, and sustained availability. We therefore encourage continued efforts by industry, parties, and relevant stakeholders to ensure that low GWP MDI alternatives are made available at affordable prices, supported by adequate technology transfer and capacity building to mainly Article 5 parties, so that no patient is left behind during any transition. We thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Kenya. I don't have any further requests for the floor at this moment. I also note, as said earlier, we had a question for the Secretariat. I now turn to the Secretariat to provide an answer, and then we can propose a way forward.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. In response to the question to the Secretariat about the possibility of posting the submissions received by the EU and the US in response to decision 36/6, we would like to first confirm with the delegations of the EU and the US and seek their permission in order to post this. And once we do that, then we can post them right away. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretariat. I see a request for the floor, and I give the floor to Turkey.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Turkey would like to thank TIP for their work on their transition to lower GWP propellants and alternative inhaler technologies. While the transition to lower GWP alternatives is important from an environmental perspective, Turkey believes that its potential impacts on availability of medicines, regulatory approval process, and price should be also carefully monitored. For Turkey, increase in the price of inhaler products and accessibility of these pharmaceutical are important consideration. In this regard, we support further research on the possible impact of transition to lower GWP metered dose inhalers on medicine price, security of supply, and patient access. Turkey would also like to emphasize the importance of accessing not only the technical feasibility and environmental benefits of an alternative inhaler technologies, but also their costs, market availability, and our affordability, taking into account the needs of ensure continued access to essential healthcare while supporting the objectives Kigali Amendment. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Turkey. We have further requests for the floor. On my list, I have Cuba and the Russian Federation. I give the floor now to Cuba.
Sí, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. It's important to remember all the Article 5 countries that have these MDI installations, which are so important for their population. That's the case for our country. The support of the protocol is so important so that we can reconvert these factories. These factories in our country represent more than 30% of the consumption of R135A, which is an HFC with a GWP, as we all know, it's about 1,500 GWP. It's important to remember the support that we need to have these alternatives as quickly as possible. And also, we ask the TIP group to provide all necessary information so that we can be aware of what alternatives there are to 152A, which we think is a refrigerant with extraordinary potential to change these factories, and also to give us support in terms of the know-how and the technology so that our Article 5 countries can carry out this reconversion of MDI factories. They are of great importance for all of humanity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cuba. I give the floor now to the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Our delegation would like to point out that the use in metered dose inhalers of low GWP propellants should not be an objective in itself. In our view, issues of the environment should not take priority over the preservation of the health of the population. In the Russian Federation, medical metered dose inhalers are manufactured in 5 different factories, and everything is done in accordance with government procurement orders. As the protection of the health of our population is of priority significance to our government. Experts noted, they did so in the past and they are doing so now, that not all patients which suffer from asthma can use other substances as propellants in metered dose inhalers. And this aspect is one which must be taken into account first and foremost when we look at the issue of looking at new alternative substances. For this reason, we believe that there is an absolute necessity for the parties to ensure that the use of HFCs 134A can be continued after 2030 to ensure that there is access to this substance, as it is not possible to have a situation where, as a result of a transition to low GWP substances, all patients' needs will be satisfied with the use of medicine based on new substances, or utilizing new substances. For this reason, in our view, there is a need to ensure access to all countries who manufacture metered dose inhalers of these substances over the longer term. As we're not moving away completely from HFCs, no, it's not a phase out, it's a phase down, and the figure of 15% remains. And this is the limit within which we first and foremost intend to include the manufacture of metered dose inhalers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Russian Federation. I see no further request for the floor on this item, and I request 1 minute to confer with my co-chair and then propose the way forward. Thank you. Thank you so much for your patience. We note the discussions from the different parties, and there were specific questions asked by Morocco, which we propose that Morocco discuss with the TEEP for some answers to the questions. Noting the discussions, we propose that this agenda item be closed, and we'll have further information in the quadrennial report that's upcoming. Thank you very much. We close this agenda item, and I hand over to my co-chair for the next sub-item.
Thank you very much, Igobi. We now come to agenda item 4C, which relates to the the options for the organisation of the panel and its Technical Options Committee. Delegates will recall that at OEWG47, an informal group of interested parties met with the co-chairs of the TEEP and of its TOCs in the margins of the meeting to discuss options for its organisation and for that of the TOCs, as presented by TEEP in Chapter 8 of its 2025 progress report. At MOP 37, the informal group concluded that it was not the right time to restructure the panel and its TOCs and agreed to take up the issue again this year. In Chapter 8 of its 2026 progress report, the TEEP presents further analysis and highlights and preferred options for its reorganisation. A summary of the analysis was provided in the addendum to the note to this meeting. The TEEP has also presented on this agenda item, and we've also had a quite extensive question and answer session on this issue this morning. The relevant references for the documents are on the screen. The floor is now open for discussion on this sub-item, and we would particularly appreciate if parties had any indications of how they would like to take this issue forward at this meeting. Thank you. The floor is open. Thank you. I only have one delegation wishing to take the floor, so if other parties, okay, of course, you know. Now I have 3, 4 parties wishing to take the floor. In order, they are the United States, Australia, the United Kingdom, and the European Union. I turn the floor first to the United States.
Many thanks, Madam Co-Chair, and I appreciate the pause you gave for other parties to gather their thoughts as well. We appreciate the comments this morning in the discussion, and in particular comments from the TEEP co-chairs on the need for the TEEP, its TOCs, and its subsidiary bodies to be fit for purpose and to recognize the difficulties surrounding change management. We understand and agree with many of those points about the difficulty with thinking about change. We note 2 years ago, the parties agreed to consider, on a temporary basis at least, the idea that the RTOC would operate with a practice that is different from the past. We agreed that they would look at having subcommittees, which is not something we as parties had necessarily considered as moving forward since the change in the terms of reference several years ago. We'll also note that it's not that long ago that we formed the MC TOC. For many years, we had a medical technical committee and we had a chemical technical options committee as 2 distinct groups. And it's not that long ago that the parties decided to restructure with input from the TEEP and to combine those 2 TOCs. And we heard this morning in the report yesterday as provided by the TEEP that there's some interest in perhaps looking at subcommittee organization for that group as well. Asking for a discussion on the potential changes to the TEEP should not be viewed negatively. We greatly appreciate the work of the TEEP, its TOCs, its sub-bodies, and all of the information it provides to the parties. We recognize and appreciate the notes we heard from the TEEP co-chairs on 150 people contributing their time and effort to ensure the parties are well informed. That said, we do think it's important that we think about whether or not the current structure, and I believe I'm quoting something one of the co-chairs said this morning, is fit for purpose, and recognizing as well that change management is something they need to also consider. And in considering this, it is similar to another agenda item that is in front of the parties this year, where we are evaluating both the benefits and the drawbacks of options to ensure that we as parties are also operating effectively and efficiently. We'd like to suggest that either a contact group or informal group be formed for parties that want to further discuss this information. We appreciate the co-chair asked us for a path forward. Our suggestion would be to have a group formed to allow the TEEP co-chairs to participate in that group so that we can ask further questions and perhaps evaluate options on a path forward. We don't have a fixed path in mind right now. We feel like at this OEWG, we'd like to gather additional information, organize our thoughts further, and think about what would be an appropriate suggestion going forward after we have an opportunity for consultation. So we're in your hands, Madam Co-Chair, is the best way to form, whether it's a contact group or informal group, but we would suggest that this conversation needs to continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, United States, and we appreciate your proposal on our way forward. I give the floor to Australia.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I guess old habits die hard, right? Australia appreciates the proposals made by the TEEP to reorganise itself and that some of its talks to better address the work and cross-cutting issues it's facing in the current progress report. We particularly thank the TEEP co-chairs for their responses to questions from parties this morning, in particular in relation to the organisation of the RTOC and the MC-TOC. Sorry. I think for us, for this party, the operation of the RTOC and the MC-TOC are a priority because we understand they seem to be overstretched in their current configuration, and our initial view is that we are broadly supportive of the preferred options put forward by the TEEP for their reconfiguration. We note as well that there are difficulties caused by having senior experts on the TEEP who are also members of a TOC, and broadly we would be supportive of a proposal to reduce the number of senior experts and for remaining senior experts not to be members of the TOC at the same time. We also note sustainability issues raised by the TEEP in its report and appreciate the difficulties outlined in Chapter 8 related to recruitment, training and retention of qualified experts on a volunteer basis. We note there are no quick fixes to these difficulties, and in particular the difficulties that non-A5 experts are facing in obtaining funding to travel. While online meetings offer savings, they do not promote mutual respect and trust, which comes from personal interactions. We note the suggestion by the distinguished delegate from the US that perhaps an informal group is formed to discuss these issues further, and we would be very happy to participate in that before kind of forming a final view and making a decision on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Australia. I give the floor now to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Co-Chair. The UK first and foremost would like to thank the TEEP for its ongoing and excellent work in supporting parties, including through today's Q&A session. We recognise that the panel continues to operate under increasing pressures as it supports parties on an increasingly broad and complex range of issues. Co-Chair, discussions on TEEP reorganisation have been ongoing since MOP 32 and have now progressed through multiple open-ended working groups and MOPs without a clear consensus. We therefore see this year's session as an important opportunity to begin to find a practical way forward on this. Specifically on RTOC, the UK supports maintaining a single overarching TOC supported by a subcommittee structure. This reflects the technical reality of the sector, where technologies and expertise significantly overlap. It also aligns with the TEEP's own experience, which is in effect trialling this subcommittee structure, that it is functioning effectively and avoids duplication. We therefore do not support splitting RTOC into two separate TOCs. On MC-TOC, we do consider that there is a strong case for exploring separating the current TOC into two separate TOCs. We believe that the existing remit spans two increasingly different work streams. The medical and aerosols transition is growing in scale and complexity across A5 and non-A5 parties, as has been alluded to by some delegations under Agenda Item 4B, and it will require sustained, dedicated attention and expertise over the coming decade. At the same time, the chemicals workstream is an important program of work in its own right, covering feedstocks, HFC23, VSLS, and other emerging issues. Separating these functions would help ensure appropriate focus and delivery with the view that any overlaps can be managed between TOCs and via the TEEP. In our view, the question for parties is not whether there are some interactions between the medical and aerosols work and the chemicals work. It's whether that interaction is sufficient to justify a single TOC structure, and if the current structure remains the effective way of organizing the work going forward. Finally, Co-Chair, and as previous speakers have indicated, we would stress that the structural discussions should be considered alongside the long-term viability of the TEEP. The panel itself has highlighted increasing workload, challenges in securing funding for experts, the attrition of expertise, and the recruitment and onboarding of new expertise as persistent challenges. We therefore see value in moving discussions towards how we sustain a diverse and balanced expert base, ensuring appropriate support for participation and considering how best to build a future pipeline of experts, as well as other matters. Noting that the significant contribution made by all experts on the TEEP and that they provide their time on a voluntary basis, we believe this is essential both for the effective functioning of the panel and the protocol. We are also open to exploring where and how best we can have substantive discussions on the long-term viability of TEEP under our meeting agenda. As previous speakers have also indicated, we would welcome an informal group on this matter, so parties can explore how best to move forward with these two matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, United Kingdom. I turn the floor now to the European Union. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We welcome the work done by TIAP in the progress report on what they see as options to improve the functioning of the panel and its technical option committees. Since we started the discussion on the organization of TIAP and the talks between parties, a number of years have passed. We note that last year's report, in reply to decision 3520, included already a number of options on how the panel and its talks could organize their work. And it included an implicit request by TIAP to allow them to continue to work on the numerous reports they have to provide for us this year. We also note that this year's report is a bit different. It focuses on preferred options per talk. And we're certain that this benefited from the ongoing experience in finalizing that numerous work they've been doing for the parties, cognizant of their large amount of work that they had to undertake for this. The EU in general appreciates as such the work done by TIAP to present the options for the organization of work. While the EU is in general supportive of the way TIAP and its talks are presently functioning, the EU is also willing to further engage with other parties on discussing how to further optimize the work. This could be done in an informal or formal setting at this meeting or later in the year at the MOP, while allowing parties still to consult on the site here. Of course, whenever such a group is formed, we would like to ask the presence of the TIAP co-chairs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, European Union, for those observations. I now have two more countries on the list, Norway and Senegal. If there are any other countries that wish to take the floor on this issue, please make your intentions known so we can conclude this discussion and propose a way forward. Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We appreciate the information provided by the TIP this morning in response to the questions posed by several parties. We found the discussion was very helpful. We also would like to appreciate their work on this matter, leading to their preferred ways to organize and carry their work. And as we consider important to have due consideration of the challenges that the TIP has highlighted, we would like to express our interest in participating in further discussion in an informal group, should it be agreed to proceed this way. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Norway. And finally on my list, I have Senegal. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Co-Chair. I would like to start by congratulating TEEP for the outstanding work that they continue to discharge. and reaffirm its importance as a scientific and technical body, which is essential for backing up all of our decisions under the Montreal Protocol. We therefore believe that any reforms or changes in its organization should be aimed at enhancing its effectiveness, its transparency, but also its inclusivity. I would like to especially underscore the following points. The need to ensure geographical equitable representation within the TEEP and all of its technical committees, the importance of enhancing the participation of experts from developing states, including African states, whose expertise and realities need to be better taken into account in our work, the need to set up mechanisms which promote capacity building, mentoring, and a renewal of experts to ensure that participation is balanced. Senegal believes that a more balanced representation will contribute to enriching the technical analyses carried out by TEEP and to ensure that the recommendations which result from this take full account of the specificities faced by the various regions, especially by A5 countries. We stand ready to continue our discussions in a constructive manner to ensure that we end up with an organization for the TEEP which is more inclusive, more representative, and better tailored to emerging threats related to the implementation of the Montreal Protocol as well as its Kigali Amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senegal, and thank you very much to all the parties that took the floor to give their views and to propose some suggestions for a way forward. It is quite clear that there is a willingness and a need to set up further consultations between parties and the TEEP and the co-chairs of the talks. So we propose to establish an informal group. We just need to set up some conveners for that group, but when we do, we will find a time and a room for that group to meet during the course of this meeting. Thank you very much. I will now turn the floor over to Igobi, who can take up agenda item 4D. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annie. We are now moving on to a consideration of agenda item 4D on changes in the membership of the panel. Table 3 of the addendum to the note by the Secretariat lists 9 TEEP members whose term expire at the end of 2026 and whose reappointment requires a decision by MOB 38. There are also members of the talks whose terms expire at the end of the year, but that their reappointment does not require a MOB decision. Those are listed in Annex 3 to the same document. The nominations to talks can be made at any time to the TEEP and the talk co-chairs, so we are not taking those up at the OEWG or the MOB. Regarding the 9 TEEP positions, the Secretariat is collecting all information on nominations, and the Secretariat will post the nominations in the MOB 38 meeting portal as they come in between now and MOB 38. I'd like to suggest that interested parties consult each other, as well as the TEEP informally in the margins of the meeting. This meeting, with a view to deciding on the nominations at MOB 38 later this year, and close this agenda item at this meeting. The discussions will continue at MOB 38. I hope this suggested way forward is agreeable to the delegates. Are there any comments or questions? I don't see a request for the floor, so I believe this is an agreeable way forward. Thank you very much. We are now moving on to the next matter on the sub-item. Oh, sorry. There is a request for the floor. I give the floor now to Saudi Arabia.
شكرا سعادة الرئيس المشاركة.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia would like to thank the TEEP and the co-chairs and the technical committees and their chairs for the information in the document. Efforts to improve the efficiency of the groups are very important, but any future change must preserve technical expertise in the groups, as well as geographical balance and proper representation of Article 5 countries, particularly when it comes to high ambient temperature countries. Any improvement process must strengthen the basis on which the groups work in order to ensure the sustainability of expertise and competences, so that countries under Article 5 can participate effectively. Any future proposals should be developed through large-scale consultations with parties and should be based on a clear impact assessment before any decision is made. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saudi Arabia, and we appreciate the comments. I see no further request for the floor, and the suggested way forward is agreeable to the delegates to close this agenda item. Thank you so much. I hand the floor now to my co-chair to deal with the next item.
Thank you very much, Igobi. We now come to agenda item 4C, any other issues? And during the adoption of the agenda, delegates will recall that Canada placed on the agenda the issue of a destruction technology. And I now turn the floor to Canada to introduce this issue. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. And just to note that we have submitted a draft decision on this issue. It's been posted as an advanced CRP5. So I would ask delegates to ensure that if they have an interest in this issue, to be looking at CRP5. But we first want to thank the TEEP and the MC-TOC for their thorough evaluation of the steam plasma arc, or SPARC, destruction technology, and the recommendations that parties approve it as a new generic category of destruction technology. As reported in the TEEP's report, the SPARC technology is distinct from other plasma-based technologies, mainly because superheated steam serves as the main plasma-forming gas, whereas under the argon and nitrogen plasma, which are already processes that are on the list of approved destruction technologies, it is the inert gas, argon or nitrogen, that serve as a primary plasma medium. And I say this because there were some questions at the beginning of whether steam plasma already fitted under one of the categories, but I think the TEEP concluded that it is indeed a new category of technology. We also note that based on information on the MC-TOC's evaluation of submitted performance data for SPARC, the destruction and removal efficiency, DRE, achieved for CFC11, CFC12, HCFC22, and HFC134A are greater than the 99.9% technical performance criteria by at least an order of magnitude, and that the technology results in emissions of dioxins and furans, acid gases, particulate matter, and carbon monoxide that are far below the recommended advisory threshold of the TEEP. We recall that yesterday when the TEEP was presenting its report, the United States asked a couple of questions to the TEEP about this technology. One was whether there was experience with respect to the use of the technology. As far as we're aware, so far there's only been some minor use. Spark has not yet been fully commercially deployed. However, the company concerned is exploring some commercial opportunities at the moment. And there was also questions about the substances, whether there would be a time when perhaps other substances could be could also be destroyed by this technology. So at this point, the tests were only made for CFCs, HCFCs, and HFCs. But I would say it's quite possible that in the future there will be tests for other substances to be destroyed through the Spark technology, and in that case, it's possible that additional information would be submitted to the TEEP. But at this point, we would suggest approving it only for these three substances. I'd also like to add that it's worth noting that the physical footprint of Spark is very small. It's about 15 to 25 meters square, relative to more traditional technologies, which can be typically more than 1,000 meters squared. And in the smallest configurations, Spark technology can be containerized, so put in a container. Additionally, its operation is all electric and does not require direct fossil fuel inputs. So the addition of Spark to the approved list of destruction technology will provide parties with another useful options, potentially, for the disposal of end-of-life controlled substances in accordance with the Montreal Protocol. Therefore, Canada has prepared a simple administrative type of decision to add Spark to the list of approved destruction technologies. This list was last modified under Decision 35/5, and we're following the standard approach and practice for adding technologies to this list. So now turning more specifically to CRP5, you see that the first operative paragraph is to approve the destruction technologies as reflected in an annex. We included the annex to the draft decision. If the decision was adopted at the MOP, then the annex would be an annex to the report of the 38th meeting of the parties to the Montreal Protocol. We'll also note that, as mentioned, the paragraph 1 notes at the end that the approval would be for concentrated sources of Annex A Group 1, Annex C Group 1, and Annex F Group 1 substances. So again, CFCs, HCFCs, and HFCs, and that the name of the technology should be steam plasma arc. And then paragraph 2 of the CRP simply invites parties to continue to submit to the Ozone Secretariat information relevant to the review of destruction technologies, which is a standard paragraph that we've had in previous decisions of this nature. Just turning quickly to the annex, so the table that we have, we thought it not absolutely essential to include this table, but we thought it would be useful for parties to have sort of a recent decision that has all the approved destruction technologies. And we essentially took this from the TEEP 2026 progress report. And following their guidance on this table, the steam plasma arc technology is the 10th listed on the table, and we highlighted it to make it easier for delegates to identify it. If the decision is approved, then the highlights would be deleted. So we propose this decision for the consideration of the parties, and we're happy to respond to the best of our ability to any questions that parties may have with respect to the CRP. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Canada, for introducing this item and also for introducing CRP5 into the plenary. I would like to ask if there are any comments or proposals in relation to either the issue or CRP5. Australia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and I thank the distinguished delegate of Canada for that introduction to this item and for introducing the CRP. We welcome the initiative of Canada in submitting information on a new destruction technology in line with Decision 30/5 to the TEEP for its evaluation. We also appreciate the information provided by the TEEP in relation to the review process and the conclusion of the TEEP to recommend the technology be added to the list of approved technologies under its own category for the destruction of Annex A Group 1, Annex C Group 1, and Annex F Group 1 controlled substances. We thank Canada for the CRP, which we have reviewed in detail, and given its standard approach and administrative nature, for this party, we would be happy to approve this CRP in plenary, and subject to the views of other parties, we don't see the need necessarily for a contact group to further discuss this unless there are other issues that are raised by other parties. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Australia, for your clear intervention. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. This issue seems very straightforward to us. We support the decision and suggest moving it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. You're even briefer than Australia. Are there any other delegations wishing to take the floor? Iran, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and also thank you for thanks for the this proposal by the Canada. So I wanted to propose, if the parties are agreed with this one, whether possible to add another annex, including a form, because they asked the parties to provide the Ozone Secretary some information regarding this technology, so that form can contain some requesting information, suppose like capacity, the technology, the technology, and also the starting dates, maybe some of the information where they're required to harmonize all this information coming through the parties. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Iran. I might come back to you on the question in a minute once I've digested what I think you've said. In the meantime, I have Bahrain and Cameroon on my list. Bahrain, you have the floor.
شكرا سيدة الرئيس المشاركة. Thank you so much, Madam Co-Chair. I would like to thank the representative of Canada for having presented this CRP. Now, from our position, in principle, we, of course, welcome the adoption of this technology, for it allows us to expand the list of technical choices from an environmental perspective when it comes to regulated or controlled substances. We believe that the TEEP must play a clear role when it comes to the adoption of new technologies and especially studying their future impact, potential impact. Despite this, it is very important to understand that advanced technologies such as these systems are extremely expensive as far as capital investment is concerned, and they're of course very energy intensive. This requires specialized technical expertise when it comes to operating them. This is why their practical implementation in a number of A5 countries would simply not be feasible from an economic perspective, at least not in the near term. Now, in cases where A5 countries would decide to explore such advanced destruction technologies, this would have to be accompanied with sufficient financial support from the multilateral fund to cover the capital expenditure costs and needs, as well as to provide long-term technical support and an integrated capacity building program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bahrain, for those observations. Cameroon, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. I want to thank Canada for proposing this technology. We've actually listened carefully on the explanations, and we think that my delegation will think that is giving us another spectrum on new technology to explore. We see that it's actually taking into consideration substances that are equally problematic. And we think that with this technology in place, which we think, given the paragraph 2 of this CRP, my delegation think that it's just enough for us to maybe move for this CRP forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cameroon. I don't have any other delegations wishing to take the floor. Iran had requested the addition of an additional annex to the CRP. I don't know whether Canada wished to respond to that proposal.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and thanks to Iran for its suggestions and also other delegates that have taken the floor on this issue. I think, I would also like turn to the TIP, but I don't believe that parties have submitted information on destruction technologies for many years. And I don't think that there is necessarily like a form that is to be used. It's done more in the communication to the TIP. The TIP will advise the party what specific information to include and how to include it. And the communication is made that way. So I think that if parties wanted to have a forum, that's another issue that perhaps could be discussed. But so far, I think it hasn't proved necessary. So we can still discuss this issue maybe bilaterally, but we don't see a need for it in this draft decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Canada. I did not hear any delegations wishing to amend or seek further information on the CRP. So my proposal is that the CRP be forwarded to the MOP for approval. Is there any objection to that proposal? I don't see any delegations wishing to take the floor. So we approve that way forward, that the CRP5 will be forwarded to the MOP for approval. Thank you very much for your time and flexibility on that particular issue. One moment while I consult on the way forward on the next agenda items. Thank you very much. So now we move to agenda item 5 on enhancing regional atmospheric monitoring of substances controlled by the Montreal Protocol. We only have half an hour and before lunch, and my understanding is that should be sufficient time for the presentation by the Secretariat. And by the advisory committee represented by one of its members. So we will turn to this agenda item now. In decision 37.1 taken last year, parties requested the Ozone Secretariat to report to OEWG48 this meeting on progress in and any outcomes on the evaluation of the suitability of potential sites situated within regions and locations identified by the Advisory Committee of the Vienna Convention General Trust Fund for monitoring of controlled substances and preparations for possible next steps towards establishing monitoring activities at potential sites. Information on progress in implementing this decision can be found in Secretariat's note for this meeting, and the addendum and the exact references are provided on the screen. I'd now give the floor to the Secretariat and to Professor Ravi Shankara from the Advisory Committee to report on progress and implementation of Decision 37/1. You have the floor.
Thank you,
minutes.
Madam Co-Chair. Oh, sorry. Yeah. In Decision 37/1, which was adopted at MOB 37 last year, the parties requested the Ozone Secretariat, in consultation with the Advisory Committee of the General Trust Fund, to continue its evaluation of potential sites for the setup of stations and operation of stations monitoring controlled substances, also with the voluntary participation with concerned parties, and to prepare for possible next steps for the setup of such monitoring activities. In the same decision, the Executive Committee of the Multilateral Fund was asked to take into account all the information that was provided by the Advisory Committee at its last meeting, including the phased approach for monitoring controlled substances, and also the updated cost estimates which were provided by the Secretariat when they developed their guidelines for the establishment of a funding window to support pilot projects under the MLF. So the Secretariat was also requested to report on progress of this work to this meeting. So the progress we can report to you now concerns three main areas. One is the development of an online tool for estimating the costs for establishing and operating a monitoring station. The second one is progress on continuation of the evaluation of the suitability of possible sites. And the third is progress made in the work of the Executive Committee of the Multilateral Fund pertaining to the establishment of a funding window to support pilot projects under that fund. So let me elaborate very briefly on each of these areas. First, on the online costing tool, you will recall that at the last MOB, we presented updated cost estimates for the setup and operation of a monitoring station, but following a phased approach, which was suggested by the Advisory Committee. And then we promised to actually develop an online tool which could be used by all the parties interactively in order to estimate the costs that they would incur in case they wanted to establish potential sites in their territories, taking into account also their national circumstances. So work is still in progress, but we have a first version of the tool which is available on the link, which you can see on this slide. This presentation is also posted in the portal of this meeting. And we would like to invite all parties to have a look at this tool and test it and provide to the Secretariat any comments or suggestions they may have, preferably via email by the 31st of August this year, so that we can take all these comments and suggestions into account with a view to finalizing this tool and launch it at MOB 38 later this year. Now, before I go into provide information on the progress made on the continuation of evaluation of monitoring sites, let's have a look at this map at the 10 possible locations which were identified by the advisory committee of the General Trust Fund in undersampled regions. All of these 10 locations, I'm not sure it's clear enough on the graph, but all the 10 locations are mentioned here. But the 5 prioritized ones are the ones which are in squares. And then starting from left to right, the advisory committee suggested the possible locations that they were suggested were in Brazil or Argentina, South Africa or Botswana, Saudi Arabia, India or Bangladesh, and Vietnam. The other regions, the other potential locations situated in Algeria, Mexico, Ecuador, the Russian Federation, and Nigeria have not yet been prioritized. So coming back to the progress made in continuing the evaluating the site suitability in identified regions, the Secretariat, a representative of the Secretariat visited actually at the end of last year, the WMO headquarters in Geneva, and worked closely with our WMO colleagues to identify possible available infrastructure on the 5 prioritized regions, or close to the locations, the 5 prioritized locations identified by the committee. Now, the outcomes of this study were presented to the advisory committee at its 28th meeting, which was held online on 9th of March this year. And the committee, by considering this issue, it agreed that the next phase of this work would be to explore the interest of the parties in which these possible locations were situated in setting up monitoring stations in their territories. So one of the co-chairs of the advisory committee, Professor Ravi Shankara, to be more specific, held informal consultations with representatives and scientists in 5 countries in the 5 priority regions, that is Brazil, India, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, and Vietnam, to clarify technical and scientific issues, and also basically to have a better understanding of the national circumstances of these countries. So earlier this year, 3 of those parties, Brazil, South Africa, and Vietnam, submitted to the Secretariat letters of expression of interest in which they basically expressed their willingness to either continuing exploring the possibility of setting stations in their territories, or going ahead and set up these stations. And finally, great progress was made by the Executive Committee of the Multilateral Fund, which at its 98th meeting, which took place in June this year, it adopted decision 98/62, by which it established a funding window for supporting pilot projects under the Multilateral Fund. So we have reproduced this decision in full in an information note, which is available on the portal of this meeting. So the parties may wish to consider it in their discussions on this issue. And with this, I would like now to turn to Professor Ravi Shankara to continue with his presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, delegates. Thank you, Sophia. I just want to first note that some of the members of the advisory committee are here, specifically Professor Lucy Carpenter, Dr. Steve Monska, Dr. Ken Jacks, Dr. Paulo Lage, and Dr. Iko San Martini from WMO, who is also an observer. You've seen this picture before. All it shows you is the current observation capabilities. And the key point I just would like to make is if you, as the parties to the Montreal Protocol, want to know that indeed you're accomplishing what you wanted to in what I would call an accountability phase of the Montreal Protocol, you would like to know where the emissions and how much is coming from where. So this is the goal, is to fill the gaps in monitoring and enabling the parties to be aware of the regional and global emissions for those considerations. Specifically, this is focused on regional monitoring, and there are, of course, already global monitoring stations. And eventually, of course, if you want to add up the regions, and you should get the global number. You know that. Okay, thank you. This is a picture you've seen before. Actually, I'm going to show you a few pictures you've seen before, so I'm going to breeze through these. This essentially looks at the wind fields of which way the wind blows, and based on that, and also knowing where the emissions are expected to be, we kind of picked 10 locations for further monitoring. And you can, if you're asking me where the what emissions they're showing, this one is for HCFC, but you could do it for other things using the website URL we show in that plot for any particular compound of interest to Montreal Protocol. Just so that we're on the same page, the white dots are the points where we'd like to monitor. Surrounding those white dots is a circle of 500 kilometers or 1,000 kilometers. That roughly is the region from which the emissions could be monitored, and it's based on wind fields at 50 meters above ground level, and the plot shows the likely regions with the large future emissions. And many of the sites, the chosen, have already been examined in terms of something called observation system simulation experiments. That is, to do ahead of time what you would expect to see and from where. In this next slide, please. I just want you to look at the two scenarios. One is what we have on the left and what we would like to have on the right. As you can see, if you were to include these 10 sites, 10 locations, a very large part of the globe would be monitored, and very large part of the emitting regions would be captured. So this extension of location provides better global coverage, and AUSIs have been carried out. Those light yellow things tells you roughly where the air would be coming from, or at least where the stations are sensitive to the air that is coming from. And also I'd like to note, in addition to the efforts we're talking about, some other entities such as NGOs are trying to enhance this monitoring. For the most part, they're trying to do what we would call a survey, and this we're coordinating with those people, and they would enhance our ability to come to quicker decisions. And also, lastly, the additional funding from the XCOM for the multilateral fund will expand and continue monitoring beyond the EU funding. And thank you for EU for that funding. Next slide, please. Okay, just again some definitions. I've told you this before last time, just so that we are not confused. Region is the geographical region from which emissions occur. Location is the area suitable for monitoring for the region of interest. A site is the exact place where you do the monitoring, and station is the physical infrastructure to be built or that is existing for suitable monitoring. So just to make sure that we are talking using the same lexicon, same words for the same things. Next slide, please. This just shows you very briefly that what looks like, if you look at the Aussies, which has been done for all the stations, the thing I want to tell you is what I showed you earlier is year-round averaged. You have to do it as a function of season and even months to figure out where the emissions are coming from. Such Aussies are being carried out or have been carried out, and we plan to carry out additional Aussies if it is necessary to do so, and resources are there to do it. Next slide, please. This might take a couple of minutes. I just want to emphasize what is needed for successful stations. And it says beyond science, but my first bullet is the science. The first and foremost thing we need is the scientific capability, interest, and willingness to be a part of this effort. That is paramount. Otherwise, it's not going to work. The second is that the Aussies for the specific sites have to be carried out before you set up the station. And infrastructure is essential. You have to have electricity, air conditioning, internet connectivity, roads, security, etc. The logistical support to transport sampling flasks is an important issue because different countries have different customs and regulations. And this is especially important during the survey period, where we expect to do is collect samples in flasks and ship them to an analytical facility either in the US, European Union, or China. When you measure all these things, you want to be able to put all of them on the same calibration scale. Okay, it's just like you talk about everything, money in US dollars. Okay, it's just putting it on the common currency. And that is absolutely essential if you want to look at the changes that are occurring and if you want to look at the overall amount, etc. And currently, the calibration scales that we are relying on is from the A-gauge and NOAA networks, and that will be propagated by other calibration facilities. And in fact, there's a new calibration facility coming up in Europe from the European Union funded effort in Europe, and also another in China. And so it will greatly expand the calibration and propagation capabilities. Lastly, I cannot emphasize this enough, sharing the data that is collected so the community can examine it is essential. More eyes on the data, the better. And therefore placing the data in an accessible data center is essential. We have thought through this as to how to do it in these proposed programs. Next slide, please. The flowchart for establishing the monitoring stations is shown here. It's just a conceptual way of thinking about it. Initial site selection, followed by sampling twice a week for approximately 6 months of data. Then determine if the site is capable or is suitable. If it is not, you go back to a different site and you have to carry out Aussies. And if the sites are good and that's going to work, we might install a high frequency station or increase the frequency of flash sampling. So it kind of breaks down into a few different categories. First is the information or service studies, where we look at these things. The site selection has been done, as we showed you, and in addition, this Georgetown University, funded by an NGO, is carrying out some survey sampling from 7 sites that would further give us information as to the suitability of sites. Enhanced analytical capabilities and calibration facilities are on the way. I just mentioned some of those things. So the point of this is we now have the capability to do what is being proposed and what would occur over the next 5 years. And this approach is in principle consistent with the MLF approach that the executive committee of the MLF dealt with. So once a station and associate personnel is tested and suitable, we can consider establishing a high-frequency station. We have to have certain flexibility in the timelines, and again, the data sharing is essential. Next slide, please. I want to end with this slide. The expanded advisory committee now has, originally it had 10, now we have additional 6 people, and it has observers from WMO, there's Paolo Lage, as I mentioned, and also from MLF, that is Dr. Ico San Martini. And the way this work is going to be done is that we're going to have, you might call subcommittees. One focused on ozone and UV that has been going on for well over a decade, and the other one focused on the Montreal Protocol gases. So it's divided between these 2 groups, and the agreement is that the committee as a whole endorses the committee's work. The committee has also been providing relevant advice to the MLF Secretariat, and that's why it's very consistent what the approaches MLF has presented and what we have presented for the EU funding. I just want to bring up a couple of points for consideration. The consistency in processes between the General Trust Fund and MLF and the associated implementing agencies is essential for rapid decision-making and implementation. This is something you might want to codify as a part of the multilateral Montreal Protocol decisions. Then also there's a question of possible reconciliation. Well, let me just say it in simple words. We think of this activity as an operational entity that's just monitoring. But unfortunately, in reality, it is not that straightforward. It actually has enormous elements of what you would call research efforts, because you have to make changes, and this changes and adjustments, and you have to constantly be vigilant, check things, and all those things, which brings in this kind of approach of a research enterprise. So we need to be kind of cognizant of this term. Even though we're calling it monitoring, it is not a completely operational entity. It is actually has certain facets that are more like research, and we know how to do it. And I think we can get that done successfully. Next slide, please. And with that, I end and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ravi and Sophia, for that presentation. There was some new information, which I think was quite helpful and interesting for the parties. Let me just turn back to where I am up to. One moment. We also recall from decision 36.1, the Executive Committee of the Multilateral Fund was requested to consider a funding modality to support a limited number of pilot projects to enhance regional atmospheric monitoring of controlled substances. And further progress was made at the last meeting of the ExCom 2 weeks ago. And an information note has been issued by the Secretariat, Information Note 5, containing decision 98/62, which was taken by the ExCom on pilot projects to enhance regional atmospheric monitoring of controlled substances. So that is for your information as well. We have a couple of minutes. I might see if there are any delegations wishing to take the floor immediately, but be assured we will continue discussion on this important issue after lunch. I see that Mexico has wishes to take the floor. Mexico, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. As this is the first time that this delegation is taking the floor, I'd like to thank the government of Thailand for their hospitality in allowing us to hold this meeting here again. And I thank all of the Ozone Secretariat for all the work they've done to make this meeting a possibility. I'd also like to congratulate the Advisory Committee on all of their work. They've provided us with new information. My question has to do with the work that could continue, particularly if the committee aims to do additional work with the 5 alternatives identified. Not the 5 priority ones, but the 5 different options. If there's any further work that is planned, it's clear to us that the work thus far has been focused on the 3 possible sites that were mentioned. But I'd like to take this opportunity to make it clear that Mexico is ready and willing to continue working with the committee to explore cooperation that we could provide, since there is infrastructure already existing which could help to strengthen this atmospheric monitoring. That's my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mexico. Actually, we hadn't organised a question and answer session for this. We were going into discussions, but of course we will collect questions and put them to either Sophia or Ravi as we need to. European Union, you have the floor.
Yes, and we have a discussion contribution to make. So just to emphasize that atmospheric monitoring is a very important topic for us, for this delegation. And to remind everyone, that goes back, of course, to scientific findings on unexpected amounts of a controlled substance in the atmosphere. And I think collectively as parties, we realized at the time that atmospheric monitoring was crucial to safeguarding the legacy of the protocol and to help us implement it. So we've taken a number of decisions in this regard, and we see now that we're making some good progress. So we'd like to emphasize that we're quite happy about the new funding window that has been agreed under the MLF. And this certainly will allow us to go forward as an international community by hopefully establishing 3 additional monitoring sites in the identified priority areas. Also, we would like to recall that, as we've announced before, that we are mobilizing 4.5 million euros, which is about 5.2 million US dollars. There are administrative delays on our side, but we hope that we can give the green light on the availability of these funds still this year. And with that money, we would be able in this activity to establish at least another 3 monitoring sites. So bringing these 2 funding streams together, we think we would be a good way towards filling some of the gaps that were recalled again in the presentation by the representative from the advisory committee. So on the funding at least side, it seems to be going in the right direction, and this is of course a major step forward. On other things, we thank the Secretariat very much for developing a costing tool. We hear that testing is needed. We encourage, of course, parties to do this. This, of course, helps the users, potential applicants to make the estimations on the cost side to put forward project proposals for atmospheric monitoring sites. We also take note that the Secretariat has met with the WNO in exchange of possible sites and available infrastructure. We see this exchange with the meteorological community very important, and also to note that WMO has been identified as an implementing agency under the MLF funding window. We note that the next step is exploring the interest of interested parties in prioritized regions, and there we encourage, of course, developing countries to show their interest. in establishing monitoring sites. And yeah, we're looking forward to making good progress there and having, filling where we have money available, filling them also with potential locations. So while this is all very good, we do see the need to work a little bit on framing all these activities. Certainly there is an important role for the advisory committee. We have relied on them a lot and we will rely on them even further in the future. But we think we might need to work a little bit on formalizing this role of the committee also. And I just saw in the slides also that pointed out the consistency of the processes, how they work together between the Global Trust Fund, the MLF, the implementing agency, two funding streams. So there is a lot of different things that need to be brought together, which is working now fine on a hoc basis, but as we move into operationalization, if that is a word, into operations, it is needed to have it maybe in a bit more formal structure. I must say we don't fully have our ideas clear yet at this point. We're exchanging further with all interested parties, not as parties here, but also, of course, the players involved, MLF Secretariat, the Advisory Committee, the WMO. And probably by the time of the MOP, we should be able to come up with a CRP on this matter to help us along further. And we're welcome to talk to anybody who's interested in this, also intersessionally. We're not ready to do this here yet, so as the way forward, we're a bit in the hands of the co-chairs. Certainly by the MOP, we would want to talk this in a contact group on the basis of a CRP. At the moment, as we said, we are consulting with the relevant parties and to make clearer also for ourselves how we should go about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, the EU, and also for foreshadowing a CRP. We will need to break for lunch now, but I do have 4 delegations on my list so far: Bangladesh, Saudi Arabia, India, Brazil, and then another 2, Iran and Kenya. So we'll take those interventions after lunch, and I have not forgotten the question from Mexico, and we will come back to that. So we finish our work in plenary this morning. There will be the informal group on TEEP organisation options. We'll be meeting at lunchtime. The proposed co-chairs are Heidi Stockhaus from Germany and Camilla Knoll from Vanuatu, and a room will be made available. So we wish you good lunch, and we will see you at 3 p.m. this afternoon to continue our discussion on this important issue. Thank you. That to CR2 for the consultations on the TEEP reorganisation. CR2, not meeting room E.